Indiana State Senators Vaneta Becker and Jim Toms discuss what's happening in the Indiana General Assembly. That's coming up next on WNIN Lawmakers. I'm John Gibson, and this is WNIN Lawmakers. We're joined this week by Indiana State Senator Vaneta Becker, who represents parts of Warwick and Vanderburgh counties, and Indiana State Senator Jim Toms, whose district includes Posey County and portions of Gibson and Vanderburgh counties. I'd like to thank both of you for coming in today. Before we talk with the senators, though, let's get a quick update from Brandon Smith in Indianapolis.
One of the contentious bills in the Senate Corrections Committee retaliates against Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears' policy not to prosecute simple marijuana possession. The legislation would allow the state attorney general to step in and take those cases. The other bill would allow 12-year-olds to be sent to the Department of Correction for a broad list of crimes that includes attempted robbery. Both measures passed despite many people speaking in opposition and few in support. Speed cameras could be coming to Indiana highway construction sites. The measure approved in a Senate committee this week would allow the Department of Transportation to put the cameras in 4 work zones statewide. Drivers would only be issued tickets for going at least 11 miles per hour over the speed limit while workers are present. And South Bend Democratic Representative Pat Bauer announced he won't run for re-election. Bauer has served 50 years in the General Assembly, longer than anyone else in state history. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
We're back now, and the first bill signed by the governor this legislative session is to spend $291 million surplus dollars on higher education building projects. And now, before the session began, the governor indicated that he would like to use some of the money to increase teacher pay, but that wasn't included. And just to touch base with both of you on that one, was that a concern for you when you voted for the bill? And we'll start with Senator Becker.
Well, a little bit. I think they could have at least taken the projected savings that that bill will provide and put that into teachers' pay or into public education. But Senator Toms and I actually filed a bill that didn't get a hearing, Senate Bill 354, right, which actually provided $75 million to schools statewide that didn't get at least the percentage of inflation. There were 144 school corporations throughout the state that did not get at least the amount of inflation in last year's budget bill. And Evansville was one of them, and Warwick County was another. But the bill didn't get a hearing. I was hoping that it might, and very disappointed that it didn't, but wasn't completely surprised by that fact.
Right. Well, Senator Toms, that bill that, as Vaneta mentioned, would have allowed $75 million to go to certain school districts, including Warwick and Vanderburgh. So where is that bill now? Is there any chance that that could get some new life?
Well, not this session now.
Probably not.
It's not going to happen. Monday will be the last day for second readings, and Tuesday's final day for third. So anything that didn't make the cut is not going to happen. But I'm disappointed we didn't get this done last year. It's just, I wish we would have. And I know I have a lot of teachers that told me about in their situations that even though they said that some teachers got raises, not all of them did. It wasn't uniform, and so it's just unfortunate.
So it looks like we're waiting till next session. Do you think there will be, can you at this point promise teachers that there will be a substantial pay increase next session?
I
Senator
certainly
Becker?
hope so. I know that there's revenue there if they want to spend it and utilize it. I certainly, as well as I know Senator Toms, will be advocating for them to do so. I know the governor talked about another buying down additional pension dollars to free up more dollars for education for pay raises. He mentioned $50 million on top of what we did last year. Our teachers in Vanderbilt County got a $500 pay raise, but they hadn't had an actual pay raise for several years. They also got a stipend, I think it was $750. But compared to a lot of corporations, that was mere peanuts. But some of those corporations floated bonds. They had a referendum and they got additional money. They got it approved by the public for not just pay raises, but that resulted in a lot more pay raises. So we'll continue to plug for more money. I think part of the problem is right now we have, instead of just one system of education, we have three, and Jim knows this too. Charter schools, vouchers, and public education. 93% of our kids are through public education. Charter schools, they're supposed to be public, but they don't have the same rules and regulations as a regular public school does, and vouchers don't either. They can pick and choose who they take. And when you looked at that budget bill last year, the charter schools got a 10% increase, vouchers got a 10% increase, and public schools got 2.5% increase. And that's across all of them, which meant we didn't even get 2.5%. Inflation was 2.9%. So we're not keeping up, and we need to do a better job. We're losing teachers. Right now, EVSC has lost 3 coaches, 3 high school coaches, because they cannot afford to take care of their families. And they're going into private business. And we're losing teachers new teachers between 3 and 5 years are going elsewhere.
And Senator Thomas, what do you hope to see next session, if not this session, when it comes to teacher pay?
Well, I'd certainly like to see that pay brought up to where it needs to be at. I'd like to see us do things a lot differently in what we're doing with education and with using these test scores to evaluate teachers on. And I had a couple of teachers in my office yesterday talking about the shortage of teachers. It's a real shortage. And I read where there's a report that there's 27% less people going into the education at the colleges to take on the profession of teaching. From 2010 to 2018, it's been a 27% drop. So all of this, and then there's another thing, and I have to speak about it because I talk about this in audiences that troubles me, and I don't know all the details to it, but last year, late summer, there was a report where the 2 virtual schools we had took $40 million of Indiana's money, and they've virtually left town. I have never heard yet if we've recovered that, if there's any effort to recoup that $40 million, but when we're talking about teachers' pay, $40 million would have went a long way toward that. I only point this out because when I hear arguments about why we didn't do this or why we should do it, that's an item that has to be considered as how are we spending our money, and are we tracking what we're doing with our money? So.
All right, well, while we're talking about schools, a House bill just passed that requires testing of every school's drinking water by 2023 for lead and copper. I believe initially it was just planned for the Gary area, I believe, but the measure then was expanded to include all schools in Indiana. It's passed the House now. Senator Thoms, we'll start with you. Are you in favor of testing drinking water in all the schools across Indiana?
You know, I can understand the reasoning of trying to make sure that we got good, clean water for our schools. I'm not sure what the fiscal is on it. I don't know what the cost would be doing that statewide. And I don't know I just know of the bill. I don't know if that's going to look at schools of a certain age, because a lot of your newer schools have went in with a different type of plumbing system. That wouldn't be a factor. But some of the older schools that have the old cast iron or the water pipes, the old type lead water pipes and copper lines, maybe those should be tested. But statewide, I just don't know how that would work as far as all the schools.
Senator Becker, are you concerned about how much that might cost?
I guess I don't know if the state's picking up the cost, or if it's just going to be another mandate that they put on schools and then make them pay for. Schools are stretched very thin, a lot of them, especially ours. And, if the state provides the funding, if it's not an unfunded mandate, I'd be okay with it because it could be very helpful for kids and their health. And one thing I did want to point out when I was talking about 3 different systems, if you look at graduation rates, our public schools graduation rate is really close to 90%. Our charter schools graduation rate is 48%.
Really?
People don't know that, and we're blessed in Evansville because we have a very good charter school with a signature school. But I will tell you that that school was started long before we ever had charter schools, and it was started by EVSC. It was done by the local school board the right way, and so it changed from what we called a magnet school to a charter school.
Right, right. All right, well, let's move on to another issue. We live in a cell phone society, obviously, these days. And Representative Sullivan authored a bill, a hands-free driving bill. That was House Bill 1070. It's now passed the Indiana House and is headed to the state Senate. Senator Becker, how do you feel about that bill that essentially makes it illegal to drive while holding a cell phone?
Well, I personally think it's probably a good idea. We already have a ban on texting. You're not supposed to text and use your phone, but the police
or drive, right?
And drive. But the police say, and it's probably true, that it's very difficult. You can't really tell if someone's texting or if they're just putting in a phone number, or if they're looking at an email, or what they're doing. So it's real hard to enforce that. This will help to enforce it. I know I did ask that question on my legislative survey to the general public, and the response was about 75% were in favor of it.
I see.
So it was overwhelmingly support. I had one person ask me, and I don't know if would they be able to use their phones for GPS. And I guess, I don't know, I haven't seen the bill yet, haven't talked about it, or looked at all the provisions.
Right.
But my guess is you'd have to put it on a stand or something in your car, and you wouldn't be able to pick it up. You'd have to probably have somebody else navigate it.
Right. Yeah, those are some of the details that aren't clear at this point. At least I haven't seen exactly where you draw those lines.
Yeah.
But Senator Thomas, what are your thoughts on this bill?
It's a noble goal. But is it realistic? We passed legislation about, as Senator Becker pointed out, not texting and driving. And I would like to know how many legislators there are that now do not drive and text. How many people in the general public drive and do not text? I don't know if that law did what they said, because it's hard to enforce it, like Senator Becker said. This idea of hands-free, certainly being distracted is a serious matter. And for somebody who drove commercially for 33 years, I understand the importance of focusing and concentrating on your driving. But on these laws, as bad as people want to have something to would reduce these accidents on our roadways, I appreciate that, but I just don't know how you can accomplish what you're hoping to, because everybody has these things. And it's interesting, even on one of the vehicles we have, on the driver information center, on the screen in the dash, occasionally there will be a warning appear on that screen that says, taking your eyes off the road could lead to an injury or an accident that can involve death, and you hit the OK button to dismiss it.
So you have to take your eyes off the road to read the
auto industry
warning.
has programmed an electronic device in your car that would take your eyes off the road to read this about taking your eyes off the road. So I only say that I really do appreciate people that's trying to come up with methods to make our driving safer.
But you think it would be hard to enforce?
I think it would be. I just don't know how you can do it. How you know that somebody's not got their phone down here? Are you supposed to be 2 and 10 on the steering wheel now? And if you don't have both hands there, that you could get pulled over. I just don't know how we would actually really enforce that. So, and I was told, I don't know, I haven't seen the bill. I don't know how well the bill's written. I don't know everything that it's designed to do can be accomplished, but we'll see.
Well, sort of in a slightly related area here, Senator Toms, You submitted Senate Bill 74, which prohibits a non-binary designation on driver's licenses,
Right.
along with permits and IDs. You've gotten some senators to co-sign the bill.
Right.
Why do you think it's needed to prohibit a designation of non-binary on a driver's license?
Well, for ages, we've always had on your driver's license an M or an F, male or female. Law enforcement uses that one document, is probably used more than any other document that we have. We use it for everything. When you present it at a store, perhaps, that you're buying something, an identification. Law enforcement, that is a critical document for law enforcement that they use when they pull someone over. And we're going to place a burden on law enforcement, those that first responders, maybe medical staff in hospitals. I just don't think that was something that would be beneficial for those who work in those frontline circumstances. I also, the BMV does not have the authority to make such a policy decision as that. The bill did get assigned but didn't get a hearing, but I think it was last week that the BMV on their own has rescinded that policy. So it's no longer an issue.
I see. Senator Becker, your thoughts on that? Do you think it's necessary to prohibit that non-binary designation on IDs and licenses?
Well, I do think that with law enforcement, at least if you're trying to apprehend a criminal, it helps to know whether they're male or female. Just if you're trying to identify somebody and you look at their driver's license, or if you see them out and you're trying to apprehend a criminal, I think it would be helpful to know whether they're male or female.
And I must say that this past summer, I did some ride-alongs with Vaneta County Sheriff, Posey County Sheriffs, and EPD. And watching the performance of their job, that's something that they always ask for. And that is a document that is very informative of information that they require. Curious enough, too, I wondered how BMV would react if somebody were to apply for a title to a car, and perhaps they're driving a blue Monte Carlo Chevrolet, but they want to title it as a red Ford pickup truck. How would they react to a request like that? Some documents are so critical, they have to be accurate. And I think this was one of those documents.
All right, well, let's move on to another Senate bill. This one that Senator Becker has signed on to. It extends certain anti-discrimination and civil rights statutes to prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender ID, national origin, and some other factors. Senator Becker, why do you feel there's a need for that?
Well, that's a very general, I guess, dialogue, identification. In fact, Evansville has an ordinance that recognizes all of those characteristics of gender identity, orientation.
Right.
We have it, but it's not in our Civil Rights Act. And it doesn't go as far as some people would like, but I think it's reasonable. The bill did not get a hearing, so it's probably dead for the session. It was actually Senator Tim Lannon's bill that he asked me to sign on to, and I did.
But at this point, it looks to be...
At this point, it looks to be dead.
Senator Toms, we'll let you weigh in on that one as well. What do you think of that measure? Do you think it's needed?
Well, last year that was a big discussion with the legislation that was being introduced, and I personally think that what we have is what the Supreme Court ruled is sufficient and adequate for our courts to use in determining those kind of situations that would it might be like a bias crime or something like that, that we have everything in our statute. I did notice that last year of all of the proposals, it was interesting they took out one word that we currently have in our protections for discrimination. They removed the word creed out of it, and that was a critical word. That's a very interesting that the word creed would be removed. Some says, well, religion's added in it. I said, religion's quite different. Creed is your faith, not your denomination you might belong to. So I don't know, but what the courts have ruled seemed to be sufficient. That's my position. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see.
All right, well, we have about 10 minutes left. I'd like to reset for our listeners on WNIN FM. This is Lawmakers. I'm John Gibson, and our guests are Senator Vaneta Becker and Senator Jim Toms. Let's move on to a measure another attempt to legislate to keep coal plants open. This year it's House Bill 1414. It would require coal plants to get state approval before shutting down. Of course, many area coal mines have closed. We'll start with Senator Toms. What are your thoughts about the state regulating whether coal plants can close or do they have to stay open?
Well, I guess maybe I stand in a different position on this. I got to tell you, I understand that everything we've enjoyed for all of these decades, all of the comforts that we have in our house, our climate in our house, or the warmth in the wintertime, the cool air conditioners in the summertime, everything that all of your electric appliances, they all work well because coal is providing that comfort. I'm concerned that I support the expansion of, or at least the development of alternative fuels. Mm-hmm. But coal is so critical, and it's inexpensive compared to the other sources of energy. It's not subsidized, and that when we close down a coal mine, and Margie and my wife and I, we've toured some of these coal mines. The operation is unbelievably clean. The advancements that they have made in these coal mines with the emissions, with the mining of the coal, unbelievable. And I'm worried that if we're going to get ourselves in a corner if we're not really thinking way beyond our headlights. These guys have told me, when a coal mine closes, and it's down for any length of time, there's a point that it would be nearly impossible to open that mine back up again. Right.
But do you support the state being able to say, no, you've got to stay open, you can't close right now?
Well, I don't know. I'd have to read all of the language of the bill. I'm a little bit concerned about big brother government telling anybody what to do. I really have a problem with that. But I don't know if this is a result of trying to keep some of these mines from closing. Maybe somebody's recognized that we could be burning a bridge here. I don't know, John. I haven't seen the language of the bill, but I do want to emphasize that we better be very careful about how far we go with shutting down our coal-fired plants. I got to point this out. If we get to the point where we don't have this, a lot of them converting to natural gas. Right. At some point, we may have an administration that will stop fracking, which could impact the natural gas supply we have. I only point these things out because I want to make sure we don't get too far out.
Let's let Senator Becker get in on the conversation here a little bit. You mentioned natural gas. Apparently, that seems to be a less expensive and more popular way these days.
And I haven't seen the language in 1414, but my understanding is that it's really only for a year. So I'm not sure what preventing utility companies from making decisions for a year is going to accomplish. Mm-hmm. I don't know, did it pass the House? Has it passed yet?
It has, let's see here, I've got the information here.
Or is it on second reading?
I believe it has not passed as of yet.
Okay,
it's still in the House at this point.
That bill was brought up last year, only at that time I don't think it had a sunset date on it, and the state chamber is opposed to it. Mm-hmm. The Indiana Manufacturers Association is opposed to it. All the utility companies are opposed to it. I think the only people that support it are maybe there were two coal companies that testified in favor of it. It's what I've read in the Indianapolis Star, but I haven't seen that. But what I've read about the details is that it expires in June of 2021. So I'm not real sure how good it is, because I think that utility companies have to make decisions long term. They can't decide in a year what they're going to do. So I'm just not sure. I haven't seen. I'd have to really see what the language does.
Sure. All right, let's move on to some other bills here. Senator Becker, Senate Bill 98 expands the ability of certified nurse anesthesists to perform their job. Could you explain a little bit about the expansion and why you think it's needed?
Well, there's a real shortage of anesthesiologists throughout the state, especially in rural areas. In fact, the Indiana Hospital Association supported this bill. What it does is it allows a nurse and an anesthetist, is what they call them. Right. They give you they put you under. Right. Okay.
It's a word I tripped over moments ago, I believe. Yeah. Yes, go right ahead.
And there are 45 states that already allow nurse anesthetists to work with podiatrists in an ambulatory care center or in a hospital. And so there are a lot of hospitals that right now they're actually violating current state law. We had testimony in the Public Health Committee from Greene County Hospital. They said, we don't have an anesthesiologist. We can't even abide by the current law because there's such a shortage. And what this will do is reduce cost and actually provide more access for Hoosiers to get better health care in rural areas. The Indiana Rural Health Association is for the bill, the Hospital Association. You know, the only people that are opposed to it are anesthesiologists, and I think, unfortunately, it's a turf battle. And everybody would like to make sure every hospital had an anesthesiologist, but right now, that's not the case, and it's probably not going to be the case. 45 states allow what this bill allows, and there haven't been any complaints as far as care. And so I think it's positive because it will do two things. It will provide lower cost and better access.
Senator Thoms, do you support the bill?
I voted for it.
Right, very good. All right, well, let's move on to yet another bill that you authored, Senator Thoms, requiring the national motto to be displayed in every classroom. The measure passed the Senate, it's headed to the House. Was someone raising this as an issue, or are there classrooms out there that don't have the...
I didn't author that
You did
bill.
not author
No,
it, but you
Senator
support it.
Cruz, I just support it, yeah.
You support it,
Yeah.
okay, we've got a mistake there. Are there classrooms that don't have this? Is that a problem as you see it?
No, I don't know. Senator Cruz has the bill. I don't know if anybody came to him. I don't see the harm in having that, so I support the measure. But
As long as it's a may provision, and they did. Originally, when the bill was filed, it was a shall provision.
So now it's a may
It's
provision.
a may provision for schools, so
Voluntary.
I don't have a problem as long as it's a may provision.
Right. Okay, in our closing minutes here, anything else to add that you may have going? As Senator Thoms, we'll take it to you real quickly.
Well, you know, I chair the Veterans Committee, and we had a couple of measures this session here to help on the HBOT, the hyperbaric oxygen treatment program that we passed last year that helps in traumatic brain injuries. And this year there was a measure in that bill that would deny the facilities that offer that treatment payment unless the patient showed improvement. Well, that was a hindrance on any facility willing to do that, so we removed that specification, and we've gotten that done. We also changed the way Indiana National Guard, they get life insurance policy through the national, federal level, and also the state. But we had to clarify on how the state administers that and gets the information out for those, so for the veterans, that there's a state life insurance policy available to them. So that was two measures that we got passed.
All right, appreciate that. I'm afraid we're running out of time. Senator Becker, I hope you'll come back with us and we'll talk some more about the measures you have going at the State House. I'd like to thank both of you, Senator Becker and Senator Thoms. Next week, our scheduled guest is Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch. I'm John Gibson. Thanks for joining us on WNIN Lawmakers.